Hi, I'm Dr. Imogene Cancellare, and I'm the program coordinator for Panthera's Conservation Genetics program. I'm currently based in beautiful Missoula, Montana, and today I'll be spending some time talking with you about how Panthera uses genetic techniques for wildcat conservation. I'll also tell you a little bit about some of my favorite wildcats. But first, what is conservation genetics? Well, conservation genetics is a research discipline that focuses on promoting and conserving genetic diversity by studying the dynamics of gene flow in populations. The reason we need genetic diversity is because it is a tenet of biological diversity. And so whether we're studying populations or entire species, protecting genetic diversity is really important for the persistence of populations, including wildcats. I started working with Panthera in 2016 as a graduate student when I began my PhD research on the range-wide evolutionary history and population structure of snow leopards across Central Asia. Compared to the other big cats, we know relatively little about snow leopards, and there's a huge gap in our knowledge about the spatial distribution, the ecology, the population structure, and the evolutionary history of this very special cat. So even though our projects are international, because wildcats live all over the world, I'm based in Missoula, Montana, specifically because Panthera works with the United States Forest Service's National Genomic Center of Fish and Wildlife Conservation. That means that we get samples sent to us from all over the world for all of our different cat species to address our project needs. For example, next week I'll be working on puma DNA. The snow leopard is a high-elevation mountain specialist that can be found in the montane ecosystems across Central Asia. This big cat has a really large distribution and can be found across 12 different countries, including Mongolia at around 4,000 feet in elevation, all the way to the Himalayan mountains in Nepal at 20,000 feet. This big cat spends a lot of its time as a snow specialist in dry, arid, snowy environments, and snow leopards tend to predate upon large-bodied ungulates, as well as smaller species like marmots. Whether it's for snow leopards or any of the other wild cats that Panthera seeks to protect, the Conservation Genetics program uses genetics to answer a myriad of questions about the conservation, natural history, population structure, diet, and even behavior of our wild cats. To do that, however, we have to have genetic material. But how do we do that when it comes to some of the world's most rare and elusive species? In order to use genetics for conservation, we have to first extract DNA from a biological source. These sources can include blood, hair, tissue, saliva. We can even extract DNA from species out of the air and sometimes right out of the water. Commonly, and especially for snow leopards, we often extract DNA from scat. And so, if you've never heard of scat, scat is another word for cat poop. These samples are sent to us from all over the world by our many different collaborators. Sometimes these samples arrive in liquid. Sometimes we get the whole scat itself, which means it's a really big piece. Other times we get smaller segments of the scat itself. And from these samples, we're able to actually extract the DNA from the animal that defecated, and then from there, we use that raw genetic data to address conservation questions. The DNA extraction process is the same for all the species that we work with at Panthera. When we bring a scat from the field into the lab, the first thing that we do is scrape off the outer edge of the material. That's because when an animal defecates, they leave epithelial cells on the material, which contains the DNA that we're interested in. From there, we chemically open the individual cells, and in a series of washes and cleaning processes, we remove all of the material that we're not interested in until we're left with liquid DNA. For me, the coolest part about what we do at the Conservation Genetics program is we're able to take data like this and turn it into this. This tiny little test tube right here contains approximately 200 microliters of snow leopard DNA. About the size of a pea, this is all the information that we need in order to identify an individual and then compare them with several other different snow leopards to learn about their population structure, their evolutionary history, and even their diet. done extracting our samples, we store them in a freezer in order to keep the DNA stable. Panthera scientists have worked to answer questions about the ecology, natural history, and more recently, the conservation genetics of snow leopards. We've also worked with the broader international community to learn more about these elusive cats from the experts who live and work alongside them. As a result, we've been able to collaborate on a variety of different efforts, including training for conservation genetics as it pertains to snow leopards, visiting other labs, and collecting and sharing data together so we can all answer questions about these cats as well as other species across Central Asia. Because so many wildcat species are difficult to observe in the wild, collecting adequate data to inform conservation and management strategies can often be a challenge. Combined with the fact that most wildcat species require really large tracts of land in order to meet their resource needs, it's often difficult to collect enough data from one area, let alone an entire species distribution. Conservation genetics is able to sometimes work alongside or in place of several of our other different research strategies in order to meet the spatial needs and the sampling needs that we require in order to make meaningful inferences about wildcats. Thanks for tuning in today to learn more about the work Panthera is doing in conservation genetics, not just with snow leopards, but for all the species that we protect. If you'd like to learn more, you can check us out at panthera.org. And if you're interested in learning more about the work that I do, you can check me out here on social media. Now, while it might not be snow leopard habitat, it is Montana, and so it's time for me to log off and take a hike. See you next time.